And welcome to the BYU Library Family History webinar. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Olivia Tuller, and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is on January 8th with James Tanner on using land surveys to find where your ancestor lived. Please note that starting January 2025, our webinars will be on Wednesdays instead of Thursdays, but still at 5 p.m. Like I said, our first webinar of 2025 will be on Wednesday, January 8th. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Kathryn Grant on understanding source tagging in FamilySearch Family Tree. After years on the sidelines, Kathryn began doing family history. Somewhat to her surprise, she discovered that she loved it. Her specialty is helping new family historians find success and maybe even avoid some of the mistakes she's made. Kathryn teaches Sunday classes at the BYU Library Family History Center and presents at other family history events. Her column on family history ran in the Nauvoo Times for about a year and is still available online. In addition, she's a regular contributor to the FamilySearch blog. Kathryn works as a technical writer and instructional designer with a focus on usability and process improvement. Her current work assignment includes developing training used on mobile devices. Besides family history, she loves uplifting music, thought-provoking books, and Christmas carols. All right, let's turn the time over to Kathryn now.
Great, Olivia, thank you so much. Well, everybody, just grateful and happy that you're here at this webinar today and hope that this will be valuable to you. So, as Olivia mentioned, our webinar is on source tagging in FamilySearch Family Tree. If you have worked in Family Tree much, most likely you have noticed this thing that I'm going to show. And that is if you click on a pencil next to any bit of information, when you open it up, there's not only the information displayed in an editable format, but any supporting sources are displayed off to the side. So in this webinar, we're going to demonstrate the different ways that let you get those sources to this area right here to show up as supporting the information. So here's what we've got on our schedule today. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, we'll answer the question, what is source tagging? And then we'll talk about 3 places where you can add or edit source tags, the source linker, the sources tab, or existing profile information. And then we'll wrap up with how the quality score, the new quality score on the profile page can help you improve tagging. So our first topic, what is source tagging? Well, you're probably familiar with online tags. They're used quite a bit all over the web. Generally, they're used to associate information with a topic or a category. So here's a couple of examples below. This is a snapshot of or screenshot of a Facebook post by Roots Tech. And notice that they have hashtagged their post with the topics of Roots Tech, family history, and genealogy. And then here's another example from the FamilySearch blog. Notice that they have categorized this particular article as dealing with genealogy records and the topic of what's new in FamilySearch. Well, the concept of source tags is similar to generic tags used all over the web. But source tags are different in that they are used to associate a piece of information, a piece of genealogical information like a birth or a residence, with the source that supports it. So here's an example on the screen. I am on the Sources tab of the profile for Arthur James Finch. And the first source in the source list is a birth source. And notice that it's got some tags here, and this source has been tagged to the name because it provides evidence of Arthur James Finch's name, and it's tagged to his birth because it provides evidence of his birth information. So again, tagged sources, once they're tagged to a certain piece of information, and as you saw, they can be tagged to multiple pieces of information. Wherever they're tagged, if you look at that piece of information by clicking the edit icon, you will see the sources that are tagged to that. And here is the one that we were just looking at, the birth registration for Arthur James Finch. There are two types of source tags used on profile pages. The first type of source tag is just vital tags, and that's what we were just looking at actually. So vital tags include the name, sex, birth, christening, death, and burial. And then the other type of tag is basically everything else. So anything that's not vital information but that is still standard information on the profile page, such as a residence or an occupation or military service or different things like that, those fall under the category of other information tags. I wanted to point out that these tags match items on the profile page, and as such, we as users can't create new tags. We just use the tags that FamilySearch has predefined that match what is on the profile page. And that's probably a good thing, because if we as users could define our own tags, you can imagine how confusing that might be, or there would be tags that were close but not quite spelled the same or whatever, and it would just get confusing. So we are, I hate to say limited, it's not really a limit, but we're required to use the designated tags that have been created by FamilySearch. You can tag, so here's an illustration of that. You can tag a source to any standard piece of information, and those are the labels that are shown in bold here. So you can tag to a name, you can tag to a birth, you can tag to a death, you can tag to a residence, tag a source to any of these items. Now notice here that the burial does not have an editing pencil here. And the reason for that is that no burial information has been added, so I can't tag anything to it. There's nothing to tag it to. So in order to be able to tag a source to burial information, I'd have to do two things. I'd have to add some burial information, and then I'd also have to attach a source that supports the burial, and then I would be able to tag that source to the burial information. Okay, that's a little bit of background. Let's talk now about the three ways that you can tag sources. The first and easiest and probably most common way is tagging in the source linker. So let's walk through an example of doing that. We are on the profile page of Charles Edward Thomas Grummet. Don't you love that name? I love unique names because they make it so much easier to find the person. So Charles has a hint here for a christening record. So I'm going to select that hint and I'm going to navigate to the source linker. So when I get into Source Linker, I see all the typical information, but there's a little area on the Source Linker that often gets ignored. It's very subtle. It doesn't just hit you in the face or anything. So notice it says that FamilySearch has added three tags automatically, but I can't see them. So interestingly enough, by default, they are collapsed. So I'm going to click Show All, and when I do that, it shows the exact tags that FamilySearch has tagged. Now, what's great about this is FamilySearch is going to remember your choice here. So once you've clicked Show More, it's going to always show the tags every time you open up SourceLinker until such time as you click Show Less if you do. So notice that the three tags, FamilySearch is really smart about designating tags. So notice that these three tags, name, sex, and christening, exactly match the information on the source, name, sex, and christening. So FamilySearch really does a lot of the hard work for us. It says, hey, I see that this is a christening record. It's got these three bits of information on it, and I suspect you're going to want to tag to those bits of information. So we're just going to go ahead and add those tags, check them off for you. Now notice these are checkboxes, so if for some reason you didn't feel it was appropriate for a certain tag to be selected, you can uncheck it. But honestly, I've never run across that situation ever in all the years of using SourceLinker. The tags have always been appropriate. So if you ever do see some kind of a mistake, which I have a hard time even imagining what that would be, but just be aware that you can uncheck a box if it seems to be wrong, or uncheck a tag if it seems to be wrong. So once you look at these and you make sure everything is looks correct, it's the way you want it, then of course we're going to write a good reason statement and we're going to click attach. And just be aware that these tags, of course, as you might expect, will not be added until we actually do attach the source, and then the tags will be saved and they'll become operational. So then if we want to verify that the source got tagged correctly, let's see if it got tagged correctly to christening. So we just come back over here, click the pencil icon, and we look at the tagged sources, and yep, there's the christening that we just tagged. So it worked as it was supposed to work. Let's now talk about a military example that works a little bit differently than the vital example. So notice that I am trying to tag this military record for World War I service. But look at the tags that FamilySearch has selected. What seems to be missing? Well, if you said a military service tag, you're absolutely right. I would have expected that to show up automatically. And I had to play around with it for a while to figure out why it didn't show up, especially because there is military service on the profile. I should mention, if SourceLinker is new to you, what's showing up on the left-hand side is information from the record I'm planning to attach. What's showing up on the right, did I say left or right? Okay, now I'm confusing myself. What shows up on the left, I hope I said that right, is the stuff from the record, all the information from the record that I am considering attaching. What shows up on the other side on the right is all the information from the person's profile in Family Tree so that I can see how well it matches. Well, there is already some military service here, so why didn't a military service tag show up here? The answer to that is that this is specifically for 1917, and this record we're looking at is specifically 1916. So FamilySearch is smart enough to say, hey, there is currently no military information on the page for 1916, and so we don't really have anything to tag at this point. So we're not going to put a military tag here. So the way that we get that information added, as you might expect, is to click the Add button. And once we do that, the military information scoots over to the Profiles side of SourceLinker, meaning this is going to be saved when we attach the source. And notice that without me having to do anything, it automatically added military service and it checked the box. So that when I add a good reason statement and I click attach, not only will this information be added to the other information section of the profile, but it will be tagged as military service. So, and tagged to this source as military service. So I click attach. And now here is how it looks in other information. That previous military service that we saw is here, and it's tagged to a source. And then the military service we just added is also here now, and it is tagged to that one source that we just tagged it to. So that's how you tag sources from SourceLinker. Let's talk now about tagging sources on the Sources tab. So again, let's walk through an example. We are looking at the Sources tab on the profile of Marianne Bescovy. And she's got a couple of sources here. She's got a census source and she's got a christening. So right now I can't see the tags because the sources are just automatically collapsed. So you see the title, but in order to see the detail, you need to click the source. So, or click the title of the source. So I'm going to click the title, and it expands the source so that now I can see detail. I can tell it's expanded also because of the gray background. But notice when I look in the tags section of this source, there's no tags. There's an option to add, but there's no existing tags. Well, this is a birth record, or excuse me, a christening record, and so I at least want to add christening, and I may want to add some other things. So I'm going to click Add Tag. And then one thing we want to be careful of when we're adding tags is we only want to add tags for information that is actually on the record. A good example here of what you wouldn't want to do is you wouldn't want to tag birth, even though often christenings do happen around births. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they can be several years, or I've even seen um, christenings slash baptisms for teenagers. And so the birth information is not indicated on this record. This is actually a snapshot of the indexed information. You see, there's nothing about a birth there. So even though we can probably pretty reasonably assume that the birth was probably somewhat close to this, the source itself does not provide that information. So we really just want to check the name tag, the sex tag, and the christening tag, and not any of the other tags. So you might have noticed that there's also an other information tag. Sometimes a christening record might mention a residence. And so if it does, FamilySearch is smart enough to realize that you're probably going to want to tag the residence to tag the source to the residence since it mentions the residence. But I've kind of decided to show a counterexample here because I've run into it a few times and I found it confusing. So I hope that by talking about this counterexample, if you run into it, then you'll know what to do about it. So if residence had been on here and I click add tag and there'd been a residence, I just would have clicked it just like the vital information and end of story. But look what happens in this case. So I clicked add tag and I get this weird message. Oh, everything's already tagged. And then my first question was then why did you offer to let me add a tag if there was nothing to tag? So maybe in the future that will change. I think it would have been more user friendly if it didn't invite me to add an other information tag that wasn't possible to add. But anyway, it is what it is. And so we see here, well, everything that can be tagged for this particular source has already been tagged. Well, here's another gotcha that I ran into that I wanted to mention to you. I thought, oh, okay, I'll just close this little pop-up by clicking the X. Well, when I clicked that, it closed everything. It took me back to like the main page, the profile page, and I lost the sources, the tags that I had already chosen. So don't click this X because you're going to lose the stuff that you've done. Instead, click this arrow to go back to the previous screen, and then you'll be able to verify, okay, I've got these tags selected correctly, and now I'm going to click Save. So then your work will be saved. So we'll click Save, and now notice that the 3 selected tags are showing up as part of the source detail. Okay, the last method of tagging sources is to tag to existing information. So let's walk through an example of that. So I'm on the profile page for Charles Grummett, and I have scrolled down, and I think he's the dad of the other guy we were just looking at. So I have scrolled down to other information, and I see that there's a residence for the 1911, or a residence with a date of 1911. And I'm pretty sure that this is from the 1911 census. I can go into sources and just make sure, yeah, it's 1911. This is the address information. But notice no sources have been tagged. Now, there was a while for when attaching sources on SourceLinker when residences were added to the other information section, but they weren't tagged. Nowadays, they are tagged. So if you run across something like this, where it's got a residence, but there's zero sources, either it was done in a previous version of SourceLinker that didn't tag residences, or somebody just added it manually and didn't tag the residence. Fortunately, it's super easy to tag a source to a bit of information. So what we want to do, again, you're probably noticing the pattern, is click the pencil icon. And once we do that, we get into the regular screen, but notice there's no sources listed. So we want to click Tag Sources. And then what happens is we get a list of attached sources. So sources that have been attached to this profile. If we had looked at this list and we didn't see the source that we wanted, we would have to exit out of this and add the source. We can't add or attach a source from here. But in this case, the source that we want, the 1911, is showing up here. So we are going to I tried to say click and select at the same time, and it came out weird. Okay, maybe that should be I should coin a new term. Anyway, we are going to select source. And when we do that, checkboxes appear next to every source. So in this case, I'm just going to click the checkbox next to the 1911 source because that's the one that supports the 1911 residence. Then I click Save. And then I get back to the previous screen, and now remember, at first there were no check marks next to any of the sources. Now that we've selected this one, a check mark shows up next to it, and so we can now click Close to get back to the previous screen. And now notice that that source that we selected has been tagged to the residence. Now here's another thing that threw me off. So we're covering some gotchas here in the hopes that it will be helpful to you. Notice that even though I have made changes because I've added a tagged source, the Save button is grayed out. My only option is Cancel. Well, if I were to edit some of this information, the Save button would become active. But sometimes I don't need to edit this information. And so what do I do? Well, the answer may surprise you. If you click Cancel, it doesn't seem like it will save your tagged source, but it will. So as long as you've tagged a source and you clicked Save on the previous screen, even if you click Cancel here, it is going to save the tagged source. So just be aware of that. And if Save had been active and you had been able to click that, then of course it obviously would have saved everything. So now we go back to the other information section just to verify that our source has been tagged, and yep, it's showing up now that there is one source supporting the 1911 residence. Okay, we are ready to wrap up. This is one of our shorter webinars. So let's talk about how the quality score, the new quality score feature, can help with making sure that the correct sources are tagged. I've got to tell you, I love this new quality score feature. It has been needed for so long, and I feel like it's really going to help improve the quality of profiles in Family Tree. So this new feature shows up under Research Help, and it gives you a quality score. There's just three: low, medium, or high. So it's pretty simple. You just look at it and go, okay, it looks like medium. There's probably some room for improvement. So I'm going to click Show Quality Details. And when I do that, I get a panel opening up over here that shows the 4 different items that are rated for quality. And notice that one of them is source tagging. So in other words, are the right sources tagged to the right bits of information? Now, this, I have to admit, confused me. An earlier prototype had stars here, and I thought that those were a lot more obvious, but for whatever reason, it was changed to this bar here that if the bar is all the way green, like there's no gray, it goes all the way to the end, that means that the quality, as far as the Family Search check is concerned, the quality is good. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. And this number indicates that too. If it says 0, means no issues to be fixed. So source consistency and conflict-free data are all good, but notice that source tag, it's not quite up to the 100% here, and it says that we've got one issue. So we're going to click the down arrow here to expand this and show us what the issue is. And it says, hey, there's a birth on this page, but it's only got one source tagged, but if you look at sources, there's going to be two sources that support the birth. So probably you're going to want to tag both of those sources. I just think this is incredible that we have systems that can help us in this way. So the next thing I want to do then is I want to go look at my sources and see what still needs to be tagged. So I looked here and I see, yep, lo and behold, both of these sources do provide evidence for birth information. But right now, again, the sources are both collapsed, so I can't see which one is missing tags. So I'm just going to start with the first one. I'm going to click on it and open it up. And lo and behold, that's the one that's missing the birth tag. Notice that it has a name tag, but that sounded funny, huh? It has a tag for the name, but it does not have a tag for the birth. So I would just click Add Tag and follow the procedure that we just looked at in the last section to add that birth tag. And once I have done that, then the source tagging moves to having 0 issues, and the green bar goes all the way to the end, and the birth tag shows up here in the detail of that source. So take advantage of the wonderful data quality score. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today. Just by way of summary, we talked about how source tagging is used to associate sources with specific information on a profile, such as a birth or a residence. There are 3 ways that you can add or edit source tags: through the source linker, the sources tab, or by editing existing profile information like we did for that residence. And finally, the quality score tool can help you improve your source tagging. So everybody, thank you so much for coming today. And Olivia, do we have any questions that we need to address?
Um, yes, or it's kind of just a suggestion for a future webinar. Ken Hansen and Camille Anthony said in the Q&A, maybe in a future webinar you can talk about tagging sources for marriages. It is possible, but it is a very convoluted process.
Oh, you guys, you totally read my mind. I almost included it, and then because it is so terribly convoluted, I opted to leave it out. But so this was a short webinar. If you guys want, I can demonstrate how to do it, or we can just do a separate webinar. How about raise your hand? Use the raise hand function if you'd like me to demonstrate it now, and I won't be offended if you say no. Okay, we've got over 10 people, up to 12. Yeah, a lot of people would like to see that. So yeah, if those of you who already know how want to sign off, please feel free. But for those who would like to stay, let's talk through how you can tag a marriage source. So let me escape out of the presentation. We're going to pop over here to Family Search. And let me find somebody with a marriage. Okay, good. This profile does have John and Millicent with a marriage. And so this is why the people who said it's convoluted, this will illustrate very well why it's so convoluted. So we're going to pop in here and we're going to see if there are any sources for the marriage, but there are not sources on the relationship. So, and I actually personally don't ever, I shouldn't say ever, but I tend to not add sources on relationships just because most people don't know they're there so people wouldn't see them. So I'm going to pop out of here for a second and I just add marriage sources over here on the oh, we're on Marianne's. Never mind. Let me get out of here and go to the parents so that we can look at their sources. So let's see. Oh, 47. Let's try Millicent instead. I don't want to wade through all the sources. Good grief, she has 25. But that's fewer. Let's look at Millicent and see. Yeah, she's got a marriage source here. So we've got, here's the issue with it. Even though this source is attached here, if I go back to the couple relationship, I cannot, there is no way to attach this particular source directly there. What I have to do, and I actually don't know if it's even possible here, what you have to do is you have to put the source in your source box, and then from the source box, you have to add it to the couple relationship. And you can add things to the source box when you're attaching, but you know what? It doesn't look like it's an option here. So just for the sake of this example, I'm going to detach this source and I'm going to say test. And now I'm going to reattach it. And see, normally you probably won't already have the source attached. So if you're attaching a marriage source to the regular, on the regular source tab, then you want to come here and say add to source box. And then I'm going to say here, oh dear, sorry, I got to get over so I can use my keyboard. So I'm going to say provides evidence of marriage, date, and location. Okay, so this is the Marriage for Millicent Spray. I'm going to click attach. And now that source has been added to my source box. And if anyone knows a better way to do this, please let me know. But I played around and I even asked one of the engineers at FamilySearch, and he didn't know of another way to do this either. So we're going to close down the source linker. The only purpose for that was to get it into our source box. Now I'm going to go back over to the Details tab, and I'm going to scroll down to the marriage, and I'm going to click, sorry, make sure I do it on the right couple. I'm going to click it for John and Millicent. And now if I go to sources, add source, see, I didn't want to add a new source because it was already attached, and plus I didn't want to type everything in, and it wasn't a memory source. So now I'm going to say attach from the source box, and it should be right at the top of my source box. Takes a little minute to load here. Okay, there it is. So I'm going to click attach, and I'm going to say again, shoot, I should have copied that other stuff. Provides evidence of marriage, date, and I spelled it wrong again, and location. I do that with and I do it with the TEH a lot of the times. So there's attach. And now if I go back, previous page, I'm going to go back into the marriage, and now the source is here. And so let me make sure I remember now we've got to expand it and notice that it has not been tagged to the marriage. But because we're on the couple relationship, FamilySearch is smart enough to say, hey, I bet if you want to add a tag, it's going to be a marriage tag. So I click add tag and click add tag, and lo and behold, it is marriage. So I click that I want to add the marriage, and then I do not click this thing because it will probably lose my changes. It does at least on the other one, like I mentioned. So I'm going to click the arrow to go back, and I'm going to click the arrow again, and I'm going to save. And I expected a marriage tag to show up there, and it's not showing up. What did I do wrong here? Marriage. Marriage is tagged. Save. Okay, I must have missed hitting save someplace. you guys, so I apologize for that. So now we see the source is tagged to the marriage, and now we can, um, I guess, close the source and exit out of here. And that is the convoluted process for tagging a marriage source to a marriage. So you can see why I just kind of prefer to put the marriage source in the list of all the other sources because people see it, and because it's a lot easier. So thanks for asking that question, you guys. That gave me an opportunity to illustrate. And if anything, it probably convinced everybody, wow, I don't ever want to tag sources that way. So thank you for your patience as we illustrated that. Olivia, are there any other questions or comments that we should address?
It doesn't look like it, no.
Great. Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming to the webinar today, and I'll turn the time back over to Olivia.
And thank you everyone else for joining us today. We hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is on January 8th with James Tanner on using land surveys to find where your ancestor lived. A recording of this webinar will be made available next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fh_webinars@byu.edu or follow Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.